Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JHR Backstage, our wonderful new companion podcast to the main show. This is our second episode.
Sure is.
Yeah, our first one is actually up on Spotify now. I got that situated. I'm having a hard time with Apple Podcasts, so that'll come eventually. But for right now, it is just up on Spotify. When I tried to put it on Apple Podcasts, it was like, "Oh, activate your Apple ID," and I was like, "Okay." So I did that. And then I refreshed the page, relogged in, and it's like, oh, activate your Apple ID. And it's like, I already did that. So I clicked there, little learn more, and then it like brought me to this page of how to activate it. And like, I did all that.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, so what now? So I refreshed it, relogged in, and it's like, oh, activate your Apple ID. And I was like, but no, I already did that. So like, I looked it up, and apparently that's like an ongoing issue with Apple Podcasts that like it's not recognizing Apple IDs correctly. So
if I've noticed anything about owning an iPhone, it's that Apple has weird login issues. That happens all the time because I've had an iPhone since I was like a kid, and they were always like, "Oh, log in." I was like, "Okay," and it's like, "Oh, log in." I was like, oh, okay, and it's like, "Oh, log in," and I'm like, Jesus. So yeah, no, that happens quite a bit with Apple, so hopefully we can get that up and running soon.
So Apple Podcasts, Apple Podcasts is coming. But for the time being...
You got it on Spotify that fast?
Yeah, it was like literally like I bought my RSS host. Like the person that like the service that uses like hosts my podcast.
Who hosts us?
RSS.com, because it was like one of the cheapest options that had the best reviews.
Fair enough.
I did quick research and like it's like $13 a month or something like that, which isn't terrible. They were like around the average of everybody else, and they had one of the better reviews. So RSS.com it is.
Sweet.
And all I had to do was just go through them and hit, okay, here's my RSS feed, Spotify. And yes, this is my email. And then they're like, okay, great. And it was up.
Wow.
Like, which is wild because, like, DistroKid tells you it takes a month to put music up live. So,
yeah.
like, yeah, which it must just be different to handle music than it is podcasts, especially if you already have, like, a host for your podcast, like a feed host, if you will.
Gets channeled through faster.
But yeah, this place is to listen to us now, and it will be uploaded on YouTube as well. At the time of this recording, it's coming out this coming Friday. And this will be the following week. But for today's podcast, I wanted the focus to maybe be on like how this show was created.
Humble beginnings.
And where we are now and where we expect to be. Because I feel like the show is probably at its best point right now. I've got all of projects like either in motion or already released that I wanted for this show, even back when I started it. But it was really funny to think, and I was talking to our... actually a graphics person about this, as you know, because you were in the room. But like I started this show in 2013.
Yeah.
Which is wild to think about. Like I was 13 years old in 7th grade.
Yeah, that's 8 years ago at this point. Jesus.
I mean, there was a 4-year gap between like seasons because I took high school off because I just straight up didn't want to deal with a show and high school at the same time.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, like, I took high school off, but then as soon as I graduated, as you know, because you just joined in for a director at that point.
I sure did.
We got right back into work.
Absolutely.
But, like, it's really funny to think about, like, and I think I talked about this on an episode that I think right now is considered lost media. I have a copy of it on DVD, but there's no digital file of it because of a failed hard drive. So, like, it's not on YouTube or anything like that. And I'm not tech savvy enough to burn the DVD onto a digital file. I was actually going to ask somebody here about that.
Oh,
but
yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
There's ways to do it.
Around.
Yeah. I know. Oh, I definitely know the other way around.
Yeah.
I've done that my whole life. But like, I think I mentioned this in that episode that you can't technically watch, so I'll say it again. I was a Voyager here, which for those not in the know, the Video Voyagers program is like a middle school program where like kids can learn the basics of camera and filmmaking and television production and stuff, which is where I actually got my start for like all of this that we're currently in the middle of. But I remember one of the mentors mentioning on the tour of the studio that like they have volunteer shows and like you could pitch a show to them and like run one and stuff like that. And the second I heard that, I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to do that. That's so much fun, which it's funny to think that I was 12.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I went home, I wrote like 3 episodes because I was thinking like, oh, they might be impressed by the idea that I actually know what I'm doing if I wrote 3 episodes of the show.
Yeah.
Like, So I wrote 3 episodes and then drew a logo on a piece of paper with crayon or whatever. And like I still probably have that somewhere if I found it. And for those of you watching on the channel or on YouTube, I might put one up over the still image if I can manage to find that sheet. It's somewhere. I know it is. It's just a matter of where.
Right.
And for those of you listening on Spotify, you can just imagine it in your mind.
Imagine if you will.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was a part of the same Voyager program. I joined a little like a year and a half later than you did, and I had the same thing where like I didn't get my beginnings from here because I did my own personal stuff, but then this place like helped. Configure me to a lot of like what's official and like kind of more what the industry's like.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to think of, because I had the same exact thought process where it's like, oh yeah, you can have a show.
Yeah.
I was like, I can have a show?
I can have a show.
And I won't get into too much details, but like me and 2 other of my friends started a show. By golly, did that happen. And then it lasted for like 4 episodes, and running a show is hard if you don't know what you're doing. But yeah, no, it's incredible to think like that 7 years ago, for me at least, 6 or 7 years ago, and now I'm like here and I'm like directing your show, and like a lot of people, I tell people this, and this is interesting because this is something I want to talk about too. Is we're so used to this that when we tell people, oh yeah, I had a show on TV once, they're like,
yeah,
what?
when I was 13, nonetheless. Like that's usually the part that gets people the most is when I was like, oh, in 7th grade I started a music talk show host.
Yeah, it's like when I was in high school I had my own TV show, and they're like, excuse me? I was like, yeah, and it aired on TV, and it was, and they were like, how did you? And I'm like, what's the big deal? I don't see what the problem is. Well, that's the thing, is that we are so used to this industry, and we're so used to like doing stuff like this that it doesn't faze us anymore. We're like, yeah, I have like 6 albums. Yeah. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. Whatever. It's just interesting.
It's so wild to me because like it's that Bane quote. It's like you love the television show, but I was raised wow. It's just one of those like it was always so wild to me once I got to high school because it was all these people being like, oh, you did all these things. I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, like, yeah, I direct a bunch of shows and do other things. Like I don't even mean to sound like I don't even know what the word, pretentious about it. Maybe
we're not trying to be pretentious.
It's like I've never even seen it as something special very very much, especially during high school.
I think the word more suited for the situation is like jaded. Kind of thing where like, we're so used
jaded
to
is probably
it.
better because like I was starstruck when I first recorded episodes and was like, yeah, watch my TV show.
Like we were like, oh, this is cool. Watch, I did this, and I did this, and now it's like we're so many years later and we're like, I did that, and
then a couple of years later I did that too.
Yeah, and everyone's like, I'm like, yeah, but you get the point. But like that's the thing. It's just it's crazy to be in this industry at such a young age. And then that's your life. You're just so used to it, and people are like, "I can't believe you did that." And I was like,
"It's been I've been doing this kind of stuff for nearly 10 years now."
Yeah,
because I started in the summer of 2012. So next year will be 10 years of me doing this kind of stuff. I was 11 years old.
Yeah,
when I started here at BCAT as part of their Video Voyagers program, and decided I like fully wanted to do television production moving forward.
Yeah, and my video production journey started when I was like 11 or 12 or something, but on personal videos. But
I had like stop motion Lego videos and stuff like that on this old tape camera we had all the way back to when I was like 6 or 7. But like the first real things I produced came around the time that I got here. Like I consider that my start into it because before that I was just like hitting record on a tape camera and calling it a day. Like,
yeah, pretty much.
There was no thought process behind anything I did. Like,
I don't even know where my first uploaded video is because it's not on a place that I have regular access to anymore.
Yeah, it was on that channel you guys used to call the Derp Squad, right?
No,
which I think it's taken down.
No, it wasn't that. My first video was on a YouTube channel my dad used to
Okay.
have.
Yeah.
And it was a playthrough of a game.
You were Let's Playing
I
even
was.
all the way back then. Right?
I was born to Let's Play, but no, it's just the idea of that's a depressing sentence. But no, it was. I don't know when that video came out. I want to say it was like a year before I made my own channel, but like that's just the whole thing where people, wonder like how we accomplish these things, how we've gotten so far, why we're able to do all this stuff, and we're only like 20.
Yeah.
And people are like, how do you know how to do all this? And I was like,
We started
that was
super
my
early.
life.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a fact of life. If you want to get good at something, you have to constantly practice, do it. Like not every day. You don't have to do the thing every single day, but you have to practice, hone the skill. And we just have been doing this for a very long time, and so we just we started very early. So now we have a good concept of it.
To think of where James's House of Rock started to where it is now is just completely insane to me. Because if you go back, and these are on YouTube, these are public. If you go back to like the first episode with tiny little 13-year-old me, the format of the show is just so different.
Is it?
Like I just spouted like fact after fact at you for like 15 minutes without pausing ever. Like I would talk so fast back then because I was a little nervous, at least to begin with. Then when we moved into season 2, it got a little bit better because we started having a little bit more guests and the show started to be formed a little bit better.
Yep.
But even then it was still pretty loose. And like the biggest thing that I did back then that like I don't really do anymore is that episodes would come out like one every like 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
Because I was just all over the place.
Right.
I had no sense of responsibility or consistency.
One of those words.
Obviously, I was like 14, but like,
sure, yeah. Drive.
Yeah, episodes very rarely came out back then, which is why like it's weird to me nowadays that like season 3 and season 4 are weekly. And they have been weekly pretty consistently.
Yeah.
And even just like when it came time to start the shows, because when I ended the show originally, which would have been around 2015 when I went into high school, I promised myself that when I graduated, I would bring the show back because I didn't ever want to leave the show. I just knew high school wasn't going to be a time to be handling that. So like I never wanted to leave the show behind. I just knew I really couldn't handle both.
Right.
So I promised myself that when I graduated, I would put the show back on air. And when it finally came time to do that, I was like, oh,
right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now I've graduated. Like that was a fast 4 years. So I knew starting out that I was like, I want to do something different this time. Like I want to make it an actual show now. I don't want to just be spouting facts like a YouTuber for 15 minutes. Like, which is where I came up with the idea of like, I was like, okay, how can I evolve James's House of Rock to its next level? And like the segment idea was the first thing that came up to me. So I took essentially what I did was I broke down all of the core elements of James's House of Rock. And I was like, okay, so what can I do with these? Like what different can I do with these? So the first thought that I had was splitting them up into different segments, which is actually what ended up happening. Like interview was one segment, then the album review corner, then the artist spotlight, and then the last thing I thought of, I was like, wouldn't it be really fun if we were doing a game? Like, I was like, wouldn't a music themed game just be super fun to play with guests and like we can be competitive and stuff like that? And that's just something that immediately stuck. I was like, yep, game. I was like, game needs to happen. So,
and that's what's spurred the disc spinning.
Yeah,
game
it was.
Yeah,
it was spin the CD, which was hilarious because so many guests were like, "What do you want me to do with this?" And I was like,
"That's
spin
the
it."
challenge."
I was like, "Yeah, what do you want to do with this? Like, how do you want to approach this?" Because right now the leader has like 3.5 seconds, so you need to beat that. So, one of the things that I wish got to happen was the rematch episode. So like I had told, and I think I even mentioned it, you can go back in the last episode, which would have been Hero the MC in the CD spinning. I mentioned that I wanted to have everyone back from season 3 to do like a rematch, however many people I could get. And then just quarantine got immediately in the way.
Yeah.
It was supposed to happen right before season 4, but then season 4 got moved forward because I had another guest lined up. So I was going to do like, okay, that'll be the next thing.
Right. And then here
we are. So I would still like to do that. Maybe at the end of this season, I'll have like a game extravaganza episode where we do rematches of both games, spin the CD and guess the album cover with some of the guests from season 3 and 4. If I can still reach any of these people. But yeah, no, when I brought it back, I was like, okay, this needs to be a different thing. Like, I want something actual this time. And I feel like I accomplished that pretty good. I asked you to come on as director. You would have seen some of it.
Yeah.
What did you think about the evolution? Because I don't know how much of the like original show run you remember. You were around for it, just maybe not as much.
You're talking about season 1 and 2?
Yeah, season 1 and 2.
I don't think I've seen much of season 1 or 2.
That's probably for the best.
That's okay. We're all embarrassed by our old work. But no, it's one of those, like, I saw a little bit of it, because I think you showed me, like, a clip from one of the earlier seasons. I can't remember if it was season 1 or 2. But from what I remember, the show has definitely come a long way. I can see the jump in quality.
Quality, yeah.
From one of those seasons to season 3, and I feel like that age and time and knowledge and experience played a very hefty hand in that, obviously. But no, I think that what you have is a solid format. It's a good, you have a good layout for the show, and I think that you progressed very well with where you were to where you are. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but it happened to get better when I started directing.
Well, so like, there is some truth to that statement, though, even though you're mostly joking.
Yeah.
Like, in that, I had directors, of course, throughout the other 2 seasons, but like, you're the first time in the show's run that I had a consistent director every single episode.
Yep.
And more particularly, not only did I have a consistent director with every episode, I had a consistent director who actually, worked here and knew stuff.
It's true, yeah.
Because, like, I had that a few times in the past when, like, friends or even my ex-girlfriend directed a few of the earlier episodes, like, and, like, I had people that knew the board. But, like,
yeah.
This is the first time where it's the same person every time that knows what the show's supposed to look like, now knows how the show is going to be run. So, like, there's a lot of inconsistencies in the earlier seasons because there's different directors and different styles because, like, I remember, and, like, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus here because I'm not going to say any actual names.
Right.
But season 2 especially, the newest thing here in the studio was the whole virtual console, virtual set thing that we had just...
Right.
Like,
that's
that we had just
right.
did, and I pushed back on that hard. I did not want to do a virtual set, but I was essentially forced into it.
I was gonna say,
because it was the new shiny thing, and
Yeah.
they wanted most of their shows to start using it. So I was like,
You still don't use it.
okay, yeah, well, yeah. They even, when I came back to film season 3 again, the person who will not be named was like, "Do you want to use the virtual sets?" And I was like, "No." I was like, I want practical sets. It's so much nicer. It's so much cleaner.
It looks
Like,
cleaner. It
yeah,
does.
It,
I think
like,
a
I
practical set
understand
suits
that
it.
the virtual sets are cool, and, like, I like the gimmick, but season 2 looks so awkward because it's hard to bounce anything off of anything when there's nothing in the room with you.
Yeah.
Like, I was, like, literally just sitting in front of a green screen on a stool.
The problem you run into with virtual sets is that you need to have, like, the whole room needs to be a boxed-in green screen.
Yeah, which is actually they have now.
We have that now.
Originally, I was, for season 3,
Right.
that was where we were going to move, but I decided not to with the face of the practical sets.
Right. But I honestly think that the practical set fits it better.
I agree.
But that's the thing, is that unless the entire room is a green screen, it does not going to really work. It's going to look weird. It's going to look very off because it's like the way that you can only have like certain angles and like everything's going to look a little strange. So especially with the options that we had available at the time is that it just wouldn't have fit.
Yeah.
So I think the choice to go practical was definitely a good idea.
I agree.
So I'm glad that we stuck with that.
Which is why when season 3 was starting, I was like, okay, I'm not going to make the same mistake season 2 had. I'm not going to get like, not forced into it, but I'm not going to get like highly suggested into it. No, I'm going to actually do practical again.
Stick to your guns.
Yeah, it fits the show's format a whole lot better. And I feel like season 4 finally, in my eyes, like the last episode and the one we taped tonight is like it's finally the time where I feel like this is like the definitive edition of James the Sus Rock. I feel like
figured it out.
all of the stuff is decided now.
Yeah.
The format's clean, like it's done. I think the last step on that was the new animated, for lack of a better words, artist spotlight and album review corner. Like I feel like those work so much better for the show than
the doing it in
like
person.
doing it in person with just a different camera angle did last season. Like, because those were fine. They were whatever. Like, it didn't hurt anything. But, like, now seeing the show be more of a variety with, like, different views and looks and colors and stuff like that.
Yeah. And being, like, more of the same.
Yeah, it's just so much better. Like,
I agree. I've yet to see these animated, quote-unquote animated bits. But in my mind, the way I think about the flow of the show, it works.
Yeah.
So, like, because it's a matter
of... different eye candy.
Exactly.
That's the difference,
Yeah, it's different things to look at. It keeps your audience engaged, which is something that I always try to keep in mind when I'm directing, too. When I'm switching camera angles, I'm like, okay, so timing and also, like, change it up. Yeah. Not too frequently, but semi-frequently so that people don't just stare at one thing for a long period of time.
Yeah.
But it in an age where, like, everyone's attention span is as thin as a toothpick, you kind of need that. You need to have things constantly grabbing people's attention where it's like, hey, and but it works, and it's like I think that having a variety of visuals makes it better. The
other big thing with that too, and I even thought of this coming into season 3 when I graduated high school and was coming back to the show. I was like, and no offense to any of my network companions, because I love all of you and I've actually worked with almost all of you. I didn't want my show to look like it was cable access.
I know what you mean.
That was the other thing, and I feel like finally these animated segments
will help
fix that. Yeah, it does fix that, because even season 3 definitely had that look. And like, again, no offense to any of my network companions. I love all of you. Your shows are great. Like, I do love the shows that we air here on the channel.
Yep. Definitely.
Absolutely. But like, they all do start to look the same. And there's no way really around that, because, you know, the studio only has
so much,
a limited amount of set pieces or cameras or like ways of doing things. Like, yeah, you can vary it. And like, I've tried to, but I feel like having those different segments that I edit myself outside of this sets that next bar apart, and I finally get that thing that I wanted when I started season 3. I was like, oh, this is not gonna be a cable access show by look.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just this is also just a funny little tidbit, but I want to throw it out there anyway, is this show is actually on my resume.
Is it?
It is.
Yeah.
It's just, I remember I had to, for one of my college courses, they wanted us to make a resume.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, how much have I done? Like, what the heck am I going to put on this thing?
What's the page limit?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh my God, you want my life story? How long you got? Like, so, and I've done so many different things, but I remember I honed in on what I deemed to be the most, you know, finished and the most, like, you know, highest production value, and like what I deemed to be some of my best work. What I put, like, my best foot forward. And I was like, James House of Rock season 3 is definitely one that I want to put on there, because it shows that I can direct.
You can add season 4 and the podcast
to
that as well. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was just a funny little thing where I was just like, hey, I directed a TV show.
You did.
So, boop, boop.
And actually, you are an integral part of this show in terms of getting it ready, because honestly, as of like season 3, I've become more talent than I am anything else. Like, seasons 1 and 2, I did do pretty much all of the setup and everything with like help from the staff here at the channel. But like, I did a lot of the setup myself. And then, you know, whereas also the host, but now it's more like, okay, well, sit down in the chair. We'll get most of the things done, but you need to be there so we can focus the camera on you. So like, it's a weird separation of more talent than production crew. And you've definitely been a big part of that. That kind of only started, again, when I had a consistent director that was competent in what they were doing, which is no offense to any of my previous directors, but like, which was mostly my dad, actually, in the early seasons. My dad used to direct the show because, you know, he was always around Saturday mornings, and I really appreciate that. He got to learn the board really well. But yeah, he did a really good job. And then I had my ex-girlfriend for a little bit, and then I know a couple of the BCAT staff have directed it here and there. Various friends that were just randomly available on a Saturday morning when I used to tape this. This was before any of us had jobs, remember? So like, we could film on a Saturday morning. Like,
And then I remember we started hanging out more often. And you're like, hold on.
Hey, wait.
I have somebody who does nothing and is always available at a moment's notice. You want to direct my show? And I was like, yeah. That's what happens when, two creative minds who one of them is, constantly busy and needs somebody who does nothing, has somebody who fits that bill.
Yeah.
Because I most of my time is spent either working on my own stuff or just sitting around. I had a job.
Yeah.
Now I don't.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Well, here you are on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
We've been in.
Wow, it is night now.
Yeah, we've been in the studio now, both filming the episode and now here in the podcast studio for maybe about 2.5, 3 hours. Yeah. Which, that's
Standard.
how this works. Yeah, this is standard. Yeah.
Very standard.
It's really funny because the idea for the podcast actually came up in season 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was originally going to record it during season 3, but I didn't have the equipment at home, and this studio didn't exist yet.
Right.
Like,
now it does.
Now it's funny because this studio exists and I have the equipment at home now.
Yeah.
So like,
I was going to say, we started pulling together because I just got like a really, really nice mic recently, and I was going to start my own personal podcast at one point, and then that one got shoved under the rug. But like that's the thing where it's just like, oh, now I have all this equipment. But
they have this really nice fancy studio that we're sitting in right now.
Exactly.
To record this in instead.
So I was like, how about we use theirs?
Yeah. And with the nice convenience of being able to finish the episode and then immediately walk into the next door over.
Yeah.
And
grab
a mic
and just leaving.
Yeah.
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 Nice meta commentary.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of this.
Well, yeah, it's a podcast.
Yeah.
Let's talk about whatever.
Yeah, we'll talk about we're talking about mostly the production of the show and all that kind of stuff, which I would love to do, and I actually have like the basis of it started. I was going to do it towards the end of this season, a making of side series.
Podcast or like video?
Video.
Video.
Like maybe a mix.
Yeah.
Mostly video though, because I'd also like show how the podcast is made and stuff too.
Well, yeah,
so,
that makes sense.
So like I'd show how I write the episodes, how I get my guests, how like we set up and record and like the set dressings, and then here in the podcast studio doing this and then editing and stuff. You can see how all over the place the production of this show typically is. Updating the website, updating our social media, that kind of stuff. Like
focused distractions. Like that's how I describe podcasts, as they're focused distractions. It's just you have a topic and you're like, this is where we're starting.
Yep.
And then it never goes there.
No. I mean, we kind of followed that line, but we did definitely deviate quite a bit.
We dance on that edge a lot.
Yeah.
But it's fine because people prefer
all over the place.
All over the place,
Yeah.
Funny, confident talk other than robotic talking about.
Which is actually why it was funny, because last night when I was getting everything prepped for today's shoot, I was like, oh, maybe I should write up some talking points for the podcast, like I had mentioned last episode that I was going to maybe do. And then I was like, you know what? No. I was like, that'll make it sound too formulaic like the show is. I want the podcast to be a little bit more casual. So like I want to come up maybe with a topic of discussion for each.
Yeah,
and then just call it from there. I don't think I really need any talking points, other than I will eventually when things actually start happening again, which right now we're still a couple months off from it, talking about the albums and concerts that are coming up, like this podcast was originally intended to do.
Yeah.
Well, because I quickly realized that we started recording this podcast too early, because it's still that point in the pandemic where like we're still about a half a year away from a lot of events happening. Like there are definitely stuff happening in September and October and stuff like that, but a lot of the shows that even I'm attending are starting next year, where we won't even be recording this podcast. So
the earliest concert that I have is in October.
Yeah. The next concert I have, I mentioned last podcast, is January. Yeah. So,
well, then let's hope that the one that I attend is interesting enough for a podcast
episode. Yeah, well, I do intend to continue this through the fall and through the winter. Even if we don't continue the main series, I do expect the podcast to stay active.
Yeah.
Depending on, time budgets and stuff like that, because we are both college students.
This is true.
And like I've got a whole bunch of other filming projects on the docket for fall and winter that we'll see if this podcast is able to keep going. But I'd like it to. I'd certainly like it to.
Yeah, me
but like
too.
that's a little bit of a refresher as to where James Susserock came from, because I was like talking about it because it's wild to me how much of like an excited kid I was about it. Even though like now, like you said, jaded's the right word. Where I was like, oh, it's my show.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, if you guys want to learn anything more about the stuff from the main episode or here in the podcast, not like we mentioned much of information, but it'll all be on the more information tab on the James Susserock website, jameshusserock.weebly.com. If you have any other questions or any comments or any suggestions, we'd love to hear them. DM us on Instagram at jameshusserock, or email us if that's still a thing you do at jameshusserock@gmail.com. The email's there. I don't know if anybody's going to use it, but that's okay.
Do you check it?
I do. Oh, of course I do.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
because a lot of the hosting platforms and stuff that make this show run send me constant update emails and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's fair.
all right, well, thank you all so much for listening. We're actually a little over time, which is okay. And we will see you guys all in the next podcast. Take a look at the main episode as well as the previous episode of this podcast and of the show. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Catch you later.